Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our snow day class today, hosted through videos here on Blackboard. So today I wanted to record a couple of videos just to make sure that we stay on top of where we need to be so that we can have our first exam covering Chapter 13, and I'm scheduling our first exam for 1 week from today, so that's next Monday, February 18th. All right, so today I'm going to talk about two things on video. This first video is going to cover stock splits, and then I'm going to do a subsequent video that talks about something called treasury stock. So stock splits happen. They're really similar to a stock dividend that we talked about last time, where we're giving shareholders who currently have a share of stock, we're giving them more shares of stock. A stock split, the easiest way to look at it is just to work through an example, and then let's talk about some reasons why a company might do it. So this stock split example that it gives us here, it's a San Diego company, had 500,000 shares of $10 par common stock authorized and 100,000 shares issued. A 5-for-1 stock split was declared. So with this stock split, what happens is we're basically changing the makeup of our common stock account. So if we're declaring a 5-for-1 stock split, that means for each of those old shares that were authorized and issued, we're calling them back in, and we're issuing 5 shares of this new stock in its place. Right? So we're just changing the fundamental makeup of our stock. All right, so if I think about that, if there were 500,000 shares authorized prior to this stock split, if I'm saying I'm replacing each of those authorized shares with a new share of common stock, that means there are now 2,500,000 shares authorized. The 500,000 shares that I called in times the 5 shares that I would be able to issue in their place. The number of shares that were issued. Again, we had 100,000 shares issued before. So if I called back each of those 100,000 shares, and I now issued 5 shares of this new stock in their place, there are now 500,000 shares of stock issued. All right, the one thing we want to make sure that we understand with the stock split is that the total paid-in capital value of the common stock account was limited by our charter. So we can't change that total paid-in capital value tied to that common stock account. That means, if I think about this, prior to this stock split, the total amount that could have been in the common stock account, if I had issued all 500,000 shares, and I remember my rule that every single time I issue it, I multiply the number of shares times the par value. So had I issued every single share that I was authorized to issue, 500,000 times $10, would tell me that my total common stock account couldn't exceed or had to be exactly $5 million. That rule still exists. Therefore, the par value has to change inversely to the number of shares that are issued and authorized. That means instead of multiplying the par value by 5, I'm going to divide it by 5 to figure out what the new par value of the stock would have to be. So $10 divided by 5 tells me the stock now has a par value of $2. So if I think about that, if I had issued every share of this new stock, 2.5 million of them, times $2, I would still have the total paid-in capital value tied to that common stock of $5 million. So it didn't change. And a stock split actually doesn't change anything on our books as far as values go in our different accounts. So we'll talk about how to handle that in just 1 second. But first, let's talk about why a company might want to do a stock split. So a lot of the reasons are similar to what we talked about last class with a stock dividend. All right, maybe they just want to be able to give the stockholders something, but they don't have cash to be able to give to them. So they decide to split their common stock instead and give these shareholders some more shares of stock. Another reason is maybe a company feels like their stock price is just too high and it's almost unattainable for a normal investor. So they want to be able to flood the market with more shares via the stock split, which is going to inversely bring the stock price down so that now a normal investor would be able to afford it. All right, so that's some of the reasons why a company might do a stock split. A stock split, like we said, a stock split doesn't change any values within our stock accounts themselves. Therefore, a journal entry isn't needed. But what we will prepare, and this is outside of the book, so just a heads up, this is just something that I'm giving you so you know how it will be handled in real life, even though your book doesn't talk about this. In real life, what we would do is we would prepare something called a memo entry, which is just an explanation in the journal that I can look back on later to make sure I understand what happened. This memo entry or explanation is very simple. It's just 3 lines. Line 1, tell the person who's looking at this transaction date what happened. All right, so it says memo, we split the common stock 5-for-1. All right, so an explanation of what happened. Next, tell the person who's looking at how many shares were there before. So before, we had 100,000 shares of $10 par. Last line, tell them what it is now. Now, we have 500,000 shares of $2 par. So that's how we prepare a stock split.